Hear me, and the broadcast is live. So hello everybody. Welcome to Sparking Courageous Thinking with ThinkCERCA and Pear Deck. My name is Victoria Thompson. I am super excited to be here today, and I am with my friend Eileen Murphy, who is also very excited to be here with y'all today. And we are going to talk about how to make Pear Deck work with ThinkCERCA. So if we go to the next slide. My name again is Victoria Thompson. I am a STEM instructional coach for a company called Technology Access Foundation located here in Seattle, Washington. I am a Pear Deck super fan, and I am also an independent educational technology consultant. If you'd like to kind of follow along with me and the things that I do, please go ahead and follow along on Twitter at Victoria the Tech, which is by far where I am the most active. And I will turn it over to Eileen.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I am Eileen Murphy. I'm the founder and CEO of ThinkCERCA, and you can follow me on Twitter at Eileen CERCA. And we're really excited to be here with Pear Deck, who ever since our earliest days when we were both starting out, we've been committed to just getting students engaged in school and in critical thinking. And so we're really excited to be joining forces these days to make sure that kids are just really developing literacy skills that are going to make our world a better place to be. So really excited to kick off today by talking a little bit about ThinkCERCA and the why behind our work, and then kicking it over to Victoria to talk a little bit about Pear Deck and what they're doing and how these two work together in the classroom. And so for many district leaders and many school leaders and teachers, a lot of people are really thinking long and hard about how MTSS can be made doable. MTSS, sometimes called AIS or RTI, is really that multi-tiered systems of supports, which in today's world, we know is more important than ever. And as this year, I think 46% of US parents reported that their children needed mental health supports, for example, and 26% of parents in the US actually sought professional help for students who needed mental health supports. We also know that academically, growth assessments and state assessments this year, after students had such disrupted education over the past 2 school years, and for many students already in this 3rd school year, are experiencing that. We're seeing this unprecedented number of school years where this whole generation is just really experiencing a very different pathway through their education. And so it's really important that we're thinking about how we create school systems that can be both flexible and resilient. And so multi-tiered systems of support within our districts is really important. And I think literacy, which is the key to every other subject, and student engagement is where it all begins. And so we wanted to talk about ThinkCERCA as something that can support literacy in English, in science and social studies and math. And we wanted to talk about how we might use Pear Deck and ThinkCERCA to support all of those subject areas in grades 3 through 12, so that we can really figure out how can we support students and helping them access the content that they need to know, develop the understandings that will help them navigate through some pretty crazy times, and develop the skills that will help them continuously learn. And so that's kind of the beginning part of this talk. So CERCA is where it all begins for us. We believe that becoming truly career and college ready and ready for our personal life and our civic life and being able to participate even in our economy is really about being able to make a claim, support it with evidence, explain your reasoning clearly, address counter arguments civilly, and appeal to your audience. So when you go into, whether it be a classroom, whether it's like a high school or college classroom, or even a 3rd grade classroom, and learn to get along with your peers and collaborate and communicate effectively, these are the kinds of skills that you need. it's also a way to look at the way other people are thinking. So you can really put yourself in someone else's shoes and understand someone else's point of view, which is really, really important today, as we have a lot of acrimony in our society. And, just learning how to sort of empathize with one another and hear each other's concerns more effectively. We just feel like it's a really important skill. So the CERCA literacy framework also kind of brings teams together, makes it easy for all of us to collaborate so that kids can use their cognitive energies not to understand our different languages for teaching them, but instead to understand the content that we're trying to teach them. And so it makes a nice basis for literacy across the curriculum, and it gives teachers and school districts a tool for a comprehensive approach to literacy across the curriculum. And I know Victoria is going to talk a lot about STEM. That's her wheelhouse. I'm going to talk probably a little bit more about the humanities and social studies, but really a strong literacy program is about making sure that we have best first instruction, culturally responsive tier 1 curriculum, that there is close reading and academic writing in every content area, but also volume reading, that kids are reading enough, and that they're speaking and listening, and that they're getting that foundational literacy practice that they need, and that we're embedding that social and emotional learning as part of that literacy instruction, because things like communicating effectively and feeling safe to be able to express your thinking is actually a really important part of learning, because if you can't open your mouth and you're afraid to make a mistake, you're not going to be able to actually learn. So that's kind of what makes up a comprehensive literacy program. And when you do it really well, you're going to succeed. And so when we've implemented in different settings, and pretty diverse ones, and we've compared ourselves and our performance to over a couple of dozen other products and controlled studies, we've actually come out on top as the top driver of growth. And this is an example of our growth in writing, about 20% more growth in writing than other products. And in reading, again, about 2 years of reading growth per year. And again, in comparison to about 24 other products, we had the highest performance, and it was about 4 times more growth than the next highest performing product. And really our secret sauce is partly just process, kind of like Julia Childs as a chef. She had the same ingredients as everybody else, but it was more about the process that she used with those ingredients that makes that food so delicious. We're all about process, and a big part of that process is the student engagement, which is why we're big fans of Pear Deck. We really believe that as students consume complex information and think about it critically and then learn to express their point of view effectively, that it is about being with the other people in the room, or maybe the cyber room like we're here today. It's about being with the teacher. It's about being with the other students and being able to discuss and collaborate around those great thoughts that students are having in response to not only the text, but also to the process and to each other. So, obviously the data that generates, whether it's the data that comes through a Pear Deck, Q&A, and some of the feedback that we can get in real time, or through the formative and summative assessments that we can get, that data informs instruction and allows teachers to be agile in their responses to student learning. And that's where I think the last piece of what I wanted to touch on today comes in, which is how do we take that data and then make these multi-tier systems of supports doable? And the way that happens is you first have to have the resources. If you know you have an issue where a student needs something to enrich their learning because they're ready to move on, or they need something to support an acceleration because they're approaching grade level but not quite there, you need to have the resources to go up and down, which is what ThinkCERCA provides, is that 10 levels of differentiation. But you really also need the routine. And so one of the things that we provide with all of our resources, and they're built into these Pear Decks now, is the routine that provides all of the resources, but also a schedule and a predictable process so that you're putting together direct instruction with skills and vocabulary, an opportunity for close reading and multiple choice, highlighting and annotating, then moving on to summarizing and planning a piece of writing, drafting and conferencing, and then, finalizing a piece of writing and conferencing with teachers. If you have less time, you might be doing it in 45 minutes. You might even be doing it in 20 minutes, but we provide these sort of sample routines so that you're not trying to come up with, brand new, different ways of teaching literacy every week. And within that, 32 different personalized lesson plans every week, or resorting to putting kids onto adaptive programs where you're taking the humans out of your work, because that's not why we come to school. We're not coming to stick kids onto programs and read reports. We're actually coming to be together. And the way to make it doable is to put the routines in place and then have the resources that we can use to differentiate instruction so that we can actually spend that time as a human teacher in small groups, doing the small group instruction, doing that one-on-one conferencing, and giving kids the extra support they need. Because the last thing a kid who's struggling needs is less attention from a teacher. So these sorts of routines and a common language provide it reduces a lot of the cognitive friction for students, gives kids a sense of safety, gives them the autonomy to move on to do their thing without a teacher standing there telling them what to do all the time. And it gives them an opportunity to sort of move on, and let them sort of move through a very predictable set of exercises at their level. And our 10 levels of instruction, combined with a very predictable routine and an easy way for teachers to check in via Pear Deck, makes for a really good set of resources to help students be autonomous, but ask for help when they need it. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Victoria to talk about how Pear Deck works with that routine and those differentiated resources.
Yes. So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think it's so important not to just have differentiated instruction, but when I also think about what it means to really engage students, this is where I find Pear Deck being a superstar in every role I think I've ever had. When I was in the classroom, now that I'm an instructional coach, it is just so wonderful for me to have Pear Deck as a tool in order to figure out what I can do in order to reach my students. So I'm actually going to kick it off with a little bit of a demo. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. That way you can see it. It's getting there. It's getting there. All right, here we go. So what I think specifically just really about getting started with Pear Deck. Something that I always like to keep in mind, especially now as an instructional coach when I work with my teachers, is that really Pear Deck is on a mission to help teachers deliver powerful learning moments to every student every single day. And that word powerful can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different folks. I interpret that, and so do a lot of the folks I work with, as not just powerful for me as the educator to see the responses, but also powerful for the student because they feel empowered to respond and engage in the class. So I'm actually going to go ahead and hop over to a Pear Deck that I worked with. I'm going to stop sharing my screen over here and start sharing instead over here. So I created this, or co-created this, with my teachers. So I am a STEM coach. Even though I work with all sorts of folks at my school, a lot of my focus is on our math and science folks. And we're recognizing and realizing that, especially because of the pandemic, and I am based in Washington State, so we've pretty much been remote or hybrid in some semblance since, March 2020. Our sixth graders are basically second semester fourth graders. And also our ninth graders are like second semester seventh graders. So we want them to think logically like a STEMinist, but we also want to make sure that they have the scaffolds there, because our job as educators is not to say, why don't you know this? It's to say, how can I help you? So we created this on mathematical thinking and logic via Pear Deck on Google Slides. Pear Deck also does have a Microsoft PowerPoint add-on, but my school does prefer the Google Slides. So I'm going to show y'all the Google Slides. And what's really neat, before I even get into what I created with them, is the template library. So essentially, there are templates that have been created for lots of different things, for beginning of lesson, for during the lesson, for end of lesson, for critical thinking, for social emotional learning, and then all these different subject areas, ranging from example questions for any content area to littles, which I used when I taught a STEM cooking class, K through 6, all the way down to math, science, social studies, world language, and ELA. Lots of cool stuff. So you might be wondering, how exactly did I get here? I have it as an add-on for Google Slides. If you do not have it there, go ahead to Get Add-ons, and it's actually one of the first ones that pops up, at least for me. So Pear Deck for Google Slides is right here. If you don't find it initially, just go ahead and search Pear Deck, and it's up there. Very simple to install. I think on my computer, it might have taken 3 minutes. However, if I go to my add-ons and I go to Pear Deck for Google Slides, this is where I see all the cool stuff that I can now add into my slide deck. I can also go ahead and add students questions and ask them questions on the fly. So whether it's text or draw or drag or make a choice, there's a lot of different options for you here to engage with students in the content. So if I go ahead to my template library, you'll notice, again, lots of different things here. And one of the things that I'd like to point out to y'all is that even if you might teach a subject, it doesn't mean you have to stay in that domain. So you'll notice that when I go through the math one, we'll see things on the template that aren't necessarily from math. So for example, for math in particular, it's what kind of questions can we ask, right? So right now, this would be kind of like a length, width, depth, or height, question, kind of like we're looking at surface area and volume. However, it doesn't need to be that. The Pear Deck slides are very customizable, and you can change them to whatever you need them to be, which is great. You can also choose different responses for multiple choice. You can do which one of these doesn't belong. You can insert different prompts for geometry and just kind of finding area perimeter. The number line is awesome, not just for little students or students that are K through 3, but I've used this with high school with high marks. They love the number line because it's a conceptual area of what's going on in math. Same with solving and entering problems. So I'll actually pop that up here for mathematical thinking and logic. And you'll notice that when I select the template, it automatically appears into my slides, which are awesome. And I can tick them, I can move them around. If I don't want them up at the top, I can move it all the way to the bottom. But it really is a way for me to have students be working on problems together. And right now, you'll see how it's customizable, because let's say that I want a one-step equation. Let's say x plus 3 equals 8. That would be a simple one-step equation. I would subtract 3 from both sides. X equals 5, because 5 plus 3 equals 8. What students would do is show their work in the box below and also put their answer in the yellow box. Or sometimes what I do with my students is I have them circle the answer if the box doesn't have enough space. Now, one of the things I'd like to say, because this is so crucial for us as educators, is that the responses from Pear Deck are anonymous as they appear. So I have had students when we're in the math classroom and they're terrified to go up to the board, or they're terrified to do something on a whiteboard, or they're even terrified to work with a partner. And the reason why is because they don't want their name attached to it. Sometimes, and this is not even just in the realm of math, they're terrified of being incorrect. And they don't want to be incorrect in front of their classmates. So I cannot emphasize enough how grateful I am that the Pear Deck responses as they appear student-facing are anonymous. Because then if somebody is incorrect, or maybe if somebody is correct, or maybe if there's somewhere in between, we get to have conversations about it, and it doesn't put a student on the spot. It makes it so that way we are collaborating and working together. And just like how Eileen was talking about, I'm a very big believer in the idea really of literacy being everybody's responsibility. It is not just the responsibility of the ELA teacher. It is not just the responsibility of the foreign language teacher. It is not just the responsibility of the social studies teacher. And I actually wrote a guest blog on Pear Deck about how I believe we can incorporate literacy with Pear Deck into every single subject. So, speaking of that, I'll show you what I did with literacy for this activity. So we wanted to have an activity on mathematical thinking and logic because, again, we want for our students to break out of the mold of being where they were pre-pandemic and kind of re-entering them into this space in a way that feels safe and comfortable. We started really by just talking about what is math. So this was not particularly, taken from the math section. If I'm remembering correctly, I think I got this from like the bell ringers or the openers, but we wanted to have them draw or type 2 things that they knew about math. So what exactly do you know about math? And not just the math that we're taking now, we're talking about math, period. Whether it's what you know, what you've learned in the past, maybe it's something that you encountered in a different class where you're like, hey, that's a math connection. Maybe you don't have a great relationship with math. We want to know so we can figure out how we can progress throughout the course of the year. So this was the first step. What do you know about math? Now we're going to talk about logic. And this is also where students were really figuring out what logic is, because logic exists, again, across the spectrum of teaching. So I have to think logically in order to come to conclusions. I have to think logically in order to work with my partners. I have to think logically in order for me to come to like a final product or a final deliverable or something on a test or assessment. So what do we know about logic and how can that work? Then we get to explain. So we really wanted for them to think critically about when they completed math problems or math challenges, how might they usually start to complete one and how would they like to show their work? And this is a moment where I'll point out that I love the diversity and inclusivity in Pear Deck because we see students with different skin tones. We see students in wheelchairs. We see students of different heights and teachers of different heights. We see people with glasses. We see people with hearing aids. I love that students and educators see themselves in the content and they see themselves in the templates. That is very important, especially to students of color, because I have worked, with folks where they'll tell me, I go to the stock photos and they're all blonde white children, and I don't teach all blonde white children. And I always point them to Pear Deck because there's lots of diversity and inclusivity like within the templates. And I love that. So working with majority students of color is very powerful for them to see themselves in the templates. After we explain, then we make some connections. So what exactly is connecting math and logic? And we decided to do a concept map, which again was not from the math section. I'm a big believer in double dipping. And I'll even show you. If I go to Pear Deck for Google Slides add-on, I accidentally clicked on the wrong thing, so it might take me a second to get there. And I go to the template library. I'm going to hop over to ELA. There's a lot of cool things that I can do here. For example, let's say that we're doing mathematical thinking and logic, and I want to do a Venn diagram. I can pull this directly up from the ELA template, and instead of comparing King Lear and Richard III, we can compare math and logic, and they would have opportunities to go ahead and compare them. I'm also a big believer in correct the sentence, which is coming up in just a few moments. Right now, this is more ELA based, but if I were doing this with STEM teachers, I might say something like the x-axis represents the dependent variable. Now, if we're doing distance time graphs, or maybe if we're working with different types of cause and effect, the x-axis actually represents the independent variable. So I can have students go in and correct the sentence, and that's a way for me to spot check their understanding of what we're doing. So those are just kind of examples of things that you can add and take from other aspects. I've even done story mapping with students. That way they understand within the context of STEM and humanities, just kind of what's going on in school. We also do a lot of perspective in my school because we are a PBL school, which is project-based learning. but we like to think a lot about point of view and what people might be thinking about the point of view. That way we can consider pitfalls, pros, cons of what we're doing with our respective projects. And then kind of going back to mathematical thinking and logic, we open into how can we share our thinking in math together. And again, there's the prompt at the bottom of every single Pear Deck template. Write your response is this one. This one is draw anywhere on this slide. This one is draw anywhere on this slide. This one over here, draw anywhere on this slide. So it gives students creative control to figure out what they need to do, not just to complete their task, but also be critical thinkers and be literate within the template, which I love, love, love. And then towards the end of the lesson, what we really talked about was how might another classmate want to share their thinking? What's another way that you can share what you learn in math? That way we all feel comfortable bringing our logic and also bringing our experience to the classroom. So if I'm kind of creating a deck, this is what it looks like. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm actually going to hop over to another tab because I will definitely want to show y'all student view and then also share with teacher view with y'all too. All right, so for the Google Slides add-on, like I said, we are opening up the Pear Deck add-on through the add-ons menu. We're adding those interactive slides like how I mentioned. And then what you do on Pear Deck is you click present lesson. So I've made this mistake before where I presented via Google Slides and then I have to go back. You do it via Pear Deck. So you click present lesson to start your interactive lesson. And then from there, it's wonderful. So on the student view, what I see is just the template. I don't really see any of the sidebar or any of the dashboard. It is just my screen that I can interact with. So you'll see here, this looks like a social studies slide or maybe an ELA slide where they're dragging different flags to different areas. So if I were a student, you'll notice that at the bottom of the template, it says drag the icons. That's where you would start to drag. And that's my prompt as a student to know, oh, well, then I know I can drag the icons now. So that's what they see. Here's what you see. So I love the teacher dashboard because really you see everything. You'll notice that at the bottom, there's a response queue. So if I have 12 students participating, I know I need 12 responses. Pear Deck will actually count responses as they come in for you, which is life-saving when you're working and you'll be like, oh, I've got 9 out of 12 responses. I think we need 3 more. Or, oh, I see that we have all 12 out of 12. Let's see what everybody said. So using those instructional strategies and that prompting and that engagement really does help, and the dashboard is crucial for that. You can also select at the bottom, I'm looking at the bottom right, the show responses. So this is where if you'd actually like to show all of the responses for your students. And again, they do appear anonymous in that view. That way you can discuss with your students. Something else you can also do is lock screens. And I am a big fan of this because if I'm working on something with someone or a group of students for 5 minutes and I only gave them 5 minutes per my lesson plan or maybe my content, I will lock the screens. So that way I can see what we have already. If it's what I need, we can move on. If it's not, we can have a conversation about it. You can also create a new question straight up out of the teacher dashboard. So if you don't want the conversation to end, or maybe if students have more questions, you can just create one on the fly. And I think that that's such a good instructional scaffolding tool. Excuse me. And then if you really want to open full dashboard, that's a Pear Deck Premium option. That's got a lot more options beyond the anonymous. You can see what people are doing, when they're doing them. And it's a lot more comprehensive than just having you look at anonymous responses. It's more in depth that way. If you don't have Pear Deck Premium, you can turn on, student face. You can end a session. You can make something full screen. So it's got a lot of options for you there. So if I were to also take a look at the teacher dashboard too, you can see, again, if I were to have responses anonymously, this is what it would look like. I don't see names attached to this. It's just what I see. So if this is what path Magellan would have taken to sail around the world, right, social studies, then this is what we would see. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing this and actually turn it back over to Eileen.
So I am going to take over the screen share again, and I will show you what we call our CERCA Slides, which are a weekly contribution to the world of education that we work hard to make. You can find it by going to ThinkCERCA.com. So if you literally just go to ThinkCERCA.com, you will see this big orange button, and then you will land on our CERCA Slides page, where every week we publish a new set of CERCA Slides and a paired offering where we've already created the Pear Decks for you. So we've created all of that interactivity that Victoria just went through with you. So we, this week, for example, in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month, released a social studies focus set on the ancient Maya. And so whether you're a 3rd, 4th, 5th grade teacher, maybe you're a middle school teacher or a high school teacher, you can learn about the Mayan civilization. And so with this particular set, you can jump in and you can use that interactive, those interactive tools by essentially learning about the, in this case, how the environment was changed through farming practices. And so through accessing the Pear Deck that's already been created, you can sign up for free using the coupon that Pear Deck has provided. You can also get complimentary access for ThinkCERCA if you're not already a ThinkCERCA user. And you can jump right in and start using ThinkCERCA through that Pear Deck. And so while you have a student-facing presentation that will help you walk through that process we talked about, where we've given you as a teacher a lesson plan, and I'll bring you right to the lesson. This is the in-app reading with audio support and multiple choice questions and assessments and a writing prompt, et cetera, a whole 6-step process that I'm going to walk you through. But you also have at your fingertips a whole set of other resources that come to you differentiated. So we talked earlier about how in today's world, where you have students coming to you at different levels of readiness, you might need to differentiate instruction. And so the way we differentiate instruction is we provide a topic that is accessible at 10 different levels, and we provide a class discussion question and brings all of those students together at different levels. And we do that across the curriculum. And so whether it be English, social studies, science, or math, you have access to all of this content. But to dive into a particular lesson, we bring each student through a close reading and writing experience. And we start with a topic overview, and then we move through a phase where we ask students to connect personally to that topic. So in this case, we're asking students to think about a time when they may have gone camping and they've brought supplies with them to help them feel comfortable. And after going through that personal connection step, where again, we created the teacher presentation so students can jump right in, we have that that discourse-rich classroom experience where we ask students to share. So there's sort of a think, pair, share. There's that personal connection. And then as a class, we have a chance to debrief using those tools that Victoria just shared. So what are some of the favorite strategies for adapting to a new situation and why? So this is where, as a class, we get students building community. We get students sharing some of their important background knowledge that they bring to all of these experiences as readers, and fill the room with that background knowledge, which are important assets that not every student is going to come to class with, but as a class as a whole, they're going to bring that experience to bear on reading. By the way, in our Pear Decks, we also offer coaching tips for the teachers. So we have things like the gradual release of responsibility model notes. We also have within each one of our Pear Decks some asynchronous notes in case students, I know there's a lot of kind of coming back and forth between quarantine and being in class and hybrid and virtual, et cetera. So all of those notes are built in there as well. As you can see, we have audio support for students who may need it. There's multiple choice questions built in. We also have highlighting and annotation built in. So as students are reading and getting ready to do a formal piece of writing, we're asking them to do some deeper learning, some critical thinking. And this is where, as students are getting ready to build their argument about how the ancient Maya created a new environment through farming practices, they're looking at multiple sources. And in this case, not only are they reading multiple texts from multiple sources, but they're also looking at images, in this case also some historical artifacts images. And they're getting ready to build their own argument after summarizing and using some of our academic language stems, which really help English learners in particular, who not only have the audio support to hear a fluent English reader, but also have the kinds of stems that help make sense of some of the wacky academic language we use, like in history, where we speak in the present tense, or we do things like describing a poem, which is not something you necessarily do sitting around your kitchen table on a regular basis, or, talk about math. These are things we sometimes only do in school. And so to hear it and to see these sentence stems provided really helps students navigate things that can actually be really helpful to them in making or breaking their success on a test, for example, in the future. And that's where the alignment to college and career readiness comes in. As students then get ready to, as we call it, spark courageous thinking, they start to use some of that evidence to build their own claim, to start to build reasons to support that claim, to take the evidence they found from the texts that they've been reading to support those claims, to take some of those notes and turn it into more fully developed reasoning statements. We recommend highly that they do that in a very chatty classroom with peers, and that they have an opportunity, of course, to share those drafts that they've created with their peers. And that's where we go back to that sharing. And that's where, again, Pear Deck comes in, where we have an opportunity to have teachers check in. So as students continue to start to draft, teachers are checking in and having an opportunity to have students share that they're ready to go. They're perhaps a little confused. They might need some help, or they're ready to collaborate. We also have students contribute to each other's thinking, and we believe that kids are actually the best critical thinking machines, far better than any adaptive AI or machine learning you could possibly create. When they start to share pieces of text that were powerful for them, it really helps students start to generate new thinking about the text, which causes them to start to rethink their own arguments and to start to finalize their drafts. And as they do that sort of final drafting process, we then have that final opportunity for the interactive opportunity for students to share their plan for their final CERCAs, as we call them, and get together and sort of do a peer editing, a peer editing step with their CERCAs before finalizing their drafts. This is also, by the way, a great opportunity for teachers to conference, because again, students are already set into that routine. And as students are going through this step of close reading, collaboration, and final writing, as students are doing that last piece, they are able to do that self-assessment and to use this great Pear Deck where they're able to give teachers feedback about what they want feedback on, because as we always say, you can't build Rome in a day. Teachers have to sort of choose their battle. And so when students have control over their growth focus and teachers can focus their attention on the feedback, you might have 150 students. And when students say to you, look, I know that the thing you keep giving me feedback on is, explaining my reasoning. I really worked hard this time to do that. Can you just focus your feedback on that? It really is more efficient for a teacher to give feedback, and it's better for a student to get feedback on the thing they're really looking to grow. And it gives everybody an opportunity to, really kind of plan their growth together, and to reflect on those goals and to share their own personal kind of emotional feelings about how their self-efficacy. And it's through this kind of dialogue that Pear Deck enables that I think students are really able to work as a partner to their teachers in their learning growth. And that's incredibly powerful. So, through this collaboration with Pear Deck, I think our lessons and the content that we provide can be really powerful. And when we know what that growth is that students are really focused on, and teachers are, reading that data, whether it be the data that we saw with Victoria's dashboard or the data that you're seeing in our dashboards, we then have, many skills instructions, lessons that teachers can assign at the exact pain point, at the exact level that students need. And together, these really powerful tools help students own their learning and help teachers really pinpoint instruction to get to the growth that we all want to see, and empower students to spark courageous thinking. And we're really excited to be working with Pear Deck and to see so many awesome teachers on this webinar today. So I hope we can start to answer some questions now about what we're doing here together.
Yeah, I think I feel like a couple. So can a teacher use ThinkCERCA with an individual license?
Yes, we do have classroom editions of ThinkCERCA. And you can reach out to ThinkCERCA through, I think we put it into the chat, to connect with one of our partner representatives.
And then I also see I have my Pear Deck account. Can I access to ThinkCERCA through it?
Through our CERCA Slides, yes, you can. Actually, you go through ThinkCERCA, and again, connect with one of our partnership representatives. And once you get set up with an account with ThinkCERCA, then as long as you are switched on to Pear Deck, that'll give you access to all of the features that Victoria went over with you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And as long as you're logged into ThinkCERCA, it'll give you access to all of the features that I just went through with you. So as long as you're logged into both of them, then yes, you'll have access to both.
Mm-hmm. More questions. We love to answer as many questions as you have.
Oh, somebody was asking about resources for English learners, and I think I mentioned a few others.
Mm-hmm.
We do have resources for supporting Spanish and English in our teacher resources section, teacher supports, and a lot more resources around literacy routines in our teacher support sections as well. And so for each one of those modules that have the 10 levels of lessons, we have teacher supports for English learners and for literacy routines more generally.
Yes. Something else too, if y'all are interested, and maybe our moderators can drop the link for the Pear Deck Orchard. There's a lot of cool stuff, and the Orchard essentially they're created, by Pear Deck. Sometimes they're created by teachers. Sometimes they're created by coaches like myself, and they are already decks that are on Pear Deck that people just want to share out. And if I am a betting person. I'd say that there's quite a bit also for scaffolds for English language learners as well. Not just full scale like lessons, but also just maybe little bits and pieces here and there for you to take a look at what there is for English language learning support. And I know I've used the Orchard a lot in the past because I think it's great, especially if you're just getting started with Pear Deck, seeing what other people have is great. So like even now looking at the Orchard, there's a book club discussion template. There's a virtual field trip to Machu Picchu. If I take a look at some of the other templates, there's one on building community. There's one on discussing hard topics. There's one on celebrating students. Like there's just a lot of cool stuff in the Orchard. So if you'd like to get started, I recommend that you hang out there for a little bit.
Great.
More questions. And if we don't, that's totally fine. You have our contact information via Twitter, so you can totally reach out to us if there's a need, if you have a question, you want to bounce ideas off of each other, then that's fine with me if it's okay with you, Eileen.
Yes, it's late on a Thursday, and we shared a lot of information, and I think we have lots of resources on our website. You can check out all of the different content areas and all of the different topics that we have. Yes. And I think that's the best way to learn about our work with Pear Deck, and just lots of great stuff. And if you're signed up for our mailing list, you'll be getting new information every week.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, I'll go ahead and share the screen for not the teacher dashboard, but the next slide is 90 days of complimentary access to Pear Deck Premium. So please go ahead and you can get that code and you can go ahead and enjoy 90 days of complimentary Pear Deck Premium access. That way you can play around with all of the premium features. And I know I've used off and on with premium. I do use premium at my school site and love every single second of it because it's just so wonderful. So you can play around, of course, with Pear Deck Premium. You can also play around in Google Slides or Microsoft PowerPoint. But we did want to give this to y'all. That way you have it in case you are interested. And I see that the moderators have dropped that into the chat. So thank you very much. And Eileen, do you want to talk a little bit about this week's CERCA Slides?
Yeah, no, just we are excited to have them out there. And the great thing about this is last week we did a set on the Sustainable Development Goals that the United Nations has for 2030. And it's about, helping to improve development across the globe in a way that does not rob future generations of the resources that we have to share with them. And so we've asked students to spark their courageous thinking about how we can do that. And I think the lessons that we can learn from the ancient Maya tie in nicely with that. It's also a great set for connecting across content areas to science, social studies, math, and English language arts. So I think it's a great set to end our celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. And then next week, you can look forward to some texts that will help us explore some of the topics related to the debates regarding Indigenous Peoples Day, which was often referred to as Columbus Day. So it'll be an exciting set next week. And each week, look for new texts and new topics across content areas. I'm really excited to be working with Pear Deck and to hopefully help the hardworking teachers on this webinar make your lives a little easier and give you a week of instruction at a time.
Yes, absolutely. Right, and we'll close out by just letting y'all know how you can stay connected with Pear Deck. On Twitter and pretty much everywhere, we are Pear Deck. So twitter.com//Pear Deck. That's where you can find them. For Facebook, it's facebook.com/Pear Deck. Instagram, there is an underscore in between Pear and the Deck. For YouTube, it is just Pear Deck, one word. And then for LinkedIn, it is linkedin.com/company/Pear Deck. And that's where you can stay connected if you just like to find out some more about Pear Deck and what Pear Deck can do for you as you are working along in your classrooms. And then also, I believe, Eileen, it's ThinkCERCA. That is okay. So that's the Twitter handle if you'd like to follow along with this as well.
Yes, ThinkCERCA, and that is our handle on Twitter. It is also our Facebook, and we have a Facebook Spark Courageous Thinking community, as well as Eileen Cerca for our Twitter handle. And excited to see you there, and have a great weekend and a wonderful fall. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
Take care.